In the early years of synchronized sound film in France, cinema's relationship to live theater was highly contested. Although often disparaged in the press as aesthetically derivative, theatrical adaptation was common, in part for expediency and in part because of the ways it showed off certain features of sound film, namely its ability to perfectly synchronize actors on screen with their voices. Many stars from the Parisian stage made a successful transition to the screen, and these new film stars played a crucial role in popularizing sound cinema among French audiences and establishing a French national sound film style at a time when the medium's future remained uncertain. Not only did French audiences take great pleasure in hearing stars speak their own language on screen, but the French singing voice also had an equally influential, if less examined, impact on audiences. Songs performed on screen by stars from the French stage bridged theatrical traditions and emerging audiovisual aesthetics of sound cinema. Perhaps more importantly, these stars' performances became crucial in familiarizing audiences with the distinct audiovisual possibilities of sound film. By associating singing stars directly with sound film technology, filmmakers helped audiences become accustomed to and ultimately embrace the developing audiovisual syntax of sound cinema. In this presentation, I examine the factors that led to the emergence of the singing star in early French sound cinema, considering the ways the singing star needed to adapt to the specificities of the audiovisual cinematic medium. Next, I focus on Henri Garat as a case study. Garat was a leading man on the music hall stage in the 1920s, who catapulted to cinematic stardom in the early 1930s. Though he had success in both mediums, his career in film far surpassed his career on the stage, signaling his success at adapting a theatrical performance style to the specificities of sound film. I examined Garat's performance in two early sound films from the 1930s, Il est charmant and Le Prince de Minuit, considering how his musical performances in his films are visually structured around his stage presence through camera framing and editing, and how the soundtrack was likewise constructed around his voice. Through my analysis of Garat, I aim to show how the singing star as a broader phenomenon contributed in significant ways to a more widespread acceptance of sound cinema in France. Stars existed in France on the stage before the screen, from Sarah Bernhardt to Coquelin to Gabrielle Réjean. But by the 1910s, as the cinematic medium secured its position as one of the primary modes of mass entertainment, the film star became its own unique phenomenon. Unlike Hollywood, the closeness of cinema and stage in France, with the geographic center of both theater and cinema being concentrated in Paris, meant that stage actors and film stars often worked closely in both mediums. However, as Richard Dyer notes in his influential books, Stars and Heavenly Bodies, the film medium's supposed intimacy played an important role in the construction of stardom in a way that broke with stage conventions, exemplified in the phenomenon of the close-up. Film theorists such as Bela Balázs have suggested that the close-up captures the, quote, unmediated personality of the individual, end quote, which gave the impression of bringing stars and their audiences closer together than was possible on the stage. When the technology to properly synchronize on-screen bodies with their voices finally became commercially viable in the late 1920s, it was not automatically accepted by French audiences. In fact, synchronized sound was initially controversial for aesthetic, nationalist, and economic reasons, as I have discussed in my book. Many French critics and filmmakers felt that sound film was being imposed upon them by international forces, rather than something they actively welcomed. French audiences warmed up to synchronized sound, however, after French language sound films began to make their way into the market. Jeanette Vincendeau points out that, quote, the main critical debates within French film have aimed to isolate the specificity of film as a medium and to distance it especially from the theater, end quote. Nevertheless, despite this fact, audiences were enthralled by hearing their own actors speak their own language on screen, no matter where the film was produced. As spoken language limited the distribution of film to specific markets, stars became more culturally and nationally specific. As such, the French film star truly began to emerge in the early 1930s. The transition to synchronized sound prompted important changes in the film star's function and presentation on screen. First, stars suddenly needed to be not only photogenic, but also phonogenic, with voices that were both appealing in their timbre and seemingly a suitable match with their visual on-screen presence. For cinema audiences, finally seeing and hearing their stars sing was just as significant as hearing their own stars speak in French on screen. In the same way that the specialness of a star's personality seemed to be captured in close-up, the grain of the star's voice, to use a term by Roland Barthes, the particular qualities that made a voice unique, could now be intimately captured on the soundtrack. Not only that, but whereas previously a fan was only given access to either the image of a star on the screen or the voice of a star on records or the radio, or both on the stage but from a distance, the sound film offered an intimate union of both body and voice for the spectator, seemingly completing their representation for the very first time. Michel Chion has suggested that the union of the voice and body in synchronized sound, quote, brought a bit of disappointment to film, the disappointment that comes from the oral filling of an absence or lack over which desire has built its nest. Once heard in reality, even the most divine voice had something trivial about it. The act of synchronizing and embodying a voice, therefore, was not straightforward. Stars had to navigate a difficult balance between offering a style of performance that spectators would have been familiar with from their stage performances and recordings, while also providing a seemingly more intimate performance style that felt more immediate to fans, all while reinforcing the importance of the audiovisual medium of sound film as the unique site in which this kind of performance could be accessed. In the context of early sound cinema, songs helped to construct the audiovisual presence of the new sound film star by drawing attention to the specialness of both the star and of sound film's ontology, as well as the close relationship between the two, helping to compensate for the potential disappointment Chion points out. There were other reasons for stars to perform musical numbers in early sound films. For instance, the inclusion of popular songs in films provided the opportunity for cross-marketing and synergy between the film and music industries. As a result, singers from a range of styles and traditions were frequently featured in early sound films in France. In particular, many stars from the music hall stage were featured in early sound films. The lavish productions at the Moulin Rouge and the Folies Bergère were a main source of competition for cinema in the 1910s and 1920s. They were also the place where many popular songs were first debuted before becoming hit records. As filmmakers aimed to legitimize and popularize the sound film, music hall was an obvious place to mine talent, owing to its mass popularity, the name recognition of its stars, and its perception as a uniquely French mode of entertainment. For all of these reasons, during the early years of sound cinema, musical performances played a particularly powerful role in connecting stars with the technology of cinema itself. I now turn my focus to Garat, a particularly successful example of a stage performer turned singing film star. Garat serves as an illustrative example of how early sound film stars performed important ideological work on screen, becoming crucial to French audiences' wider embrace of sound film technology. Garat found means to adapt his performance style in specific ways to exploit the new possibilities of sound film. On the stage, Garat performed in revues alongside Mistinguett at the Casino de Paris and the Moulin Rouge in the 1920s. He recorded several songs with Mistinguett in 1929 before his film career began, although Mistinguett is billed as the primary performer, as she was the far more established star. Here is a brief audio excerpt of a recording from 1929 of the two of them singing together. Et par cette faiblesse, je sens que je serai votre maîtresse.
Je lis dans vos yeux si bleus de bien langoureux aveux. Je crois vos serments troublants
un amant charmant, fuyant les jaloux partout. Je ne suis ces fous qu'à vous.
Je rêve des jours au concours.
Soyez mon amour
Toujours.
Garat acknowledged the importance of his music hall training for his subsequent screen success. In an interview in 1931, he stated that he was, quote, convinced that the music hall is a marvelous school for those who choose a career path in the screen. You have to know how to perform comedy, dance, sing, if necessary, do a little bit of acrobatics, and all this at a very fast pace that doesn't allow you to focus on any one effect. In other words, a film star needed to be flexible, multi-talented, and quick on his feet in order to succeed in movies. Garat's on-screen persona was that of a heartthrob. He mainly starred in romantic comedies, and his character was always playfully flirty and highly desired by the women in his films, perhaps exemplified in this clip from the 1933 film Un soir de réveillon.
J'aime les femmes, voilà mon vice, ma faiblesse et mon défaut. J'aime les femmes, ça peut paraître singulier, mais il m'en faut. Je sais qu'on blâme ceux de nos jours qui sont pour femmes. Moi je suis pour, oui, je suis pour femmes, car sans les femmes.
In this clip, he sings of his love of women, which is clearly reciprocated by the women on screen. Garat began his cinematic career starring in French-language versions of several films produced by the German company UFA, starring alongside the British-German actress Lillian Harvey. He took on the roles played by German actor Willy Fritsch in the German versions, who had a similar look and charm to Garat. These roles spanned operetta styles and time periods, from the modern automobile-focused Le Chemin du Paradis to the whimsical Le Congrès s'amuse, which was set in the early 19th century, to Française à vos ordres, a story of royalty and mistaken identity. Following his success in UFA's films, Garat went on to star in several films produced by the American production company Paramount, with the French-British actress Meg Lemonnier, including Il est charmant and Un soir de réveillon. After a brief but unsuccessful attempt at breaking into Hollywood with the 1933 film Adorable, he returned to France and again starred in a number of films throughout the 1930s. After the 1930s, his career took a sharp decline, owing to personal struggles, including health problems, drug addiction, and multiple divorces. And after a few unsuccessful attempts to relaunch his career, he died in 1959. Although a somewhat tragic figure by the time of his death, in the 1930s, he was one of the most successful early sound film stars in France and was voted the most photogenic French male star in a survey for the fan magazine Pour Vous in 1931. Garat's dashing good looks, charm, and sweet, effortless vocal delivery that was well suited for operetta and popular chanson made him both a photogenic and phonogenic figure, translating effectively from the music hall stage to the sound film screen. But what made him particularly successful as a sound film star was his ability to translate all of these features into the audiovisual intimacy of close-up and closely mic'd performances in the sound film. Garat's star power in front of the camera was magnetic. In Il est charmant, his first Paramount film, his character's charm, highlighted in the film's title, captivates all the other characters in the film and likewise captivated critics. This is perhaps most on display in his solo song Histoire de voir. The song, composed by the French operetta writing duo Albert Willemets and Raoul Moretti, is playful, modern, and catchy. Jacques meets his love interest, played by Meg Lemonnier, on the street, and as she boards a streetcar, he jumps on to follow her. Garat sings the song on the streetcar as scenery of Parisian streets whirs past them in the background.
avoir tous les atouts dont on l'a dit qu'il faut avoir du culot. Quand une femme est jolie, bien que ce ne soit pas poli, je m'attache à ses pas en disant tout bas, histoire de voir ce que ça donnera, histoire de voir si ça prendra. Suivons de loin, ma foi nous verrons bien, car qui ne rit que rien n'a rien. Deux seules choses peuvent se produire, elle rira ou ne voudra qu'en rire, histoire de voir ce que ça donnera. Vous avez ri alors, ça va. Vous bouleversez ma vie, tant pis j'en suis ravi. Tous les projets que j'ai par vous sont changés. Où me conduisez-vous? Je n'en sais rien du tout. Ferez-vous mon bonheur ou bien mon malheur? Histoire de voir ce que ça donnera, histoire de voir si ça prendra. Je veux comme ça vous dire tout ce qui vient, car qui ne risque rien n'a rien. Vous n'avez qu'un parti à prendre, écoutez, vous ne pas entendre. Osons de loin pour voir si ça rendra.
Il est charmant, ce jeune homme.
The camera is relatively static, remaining fixed on the couple, only cutting to a close-up of the two as he continues to sing to her. Lemonnier remains facing away from Garat, feigning resistance to his advances, but her facial expressions make clear that he is winning her over. Garat's performance, the other characters' reactions, and the camera editing all highlight his irresistible star power. Lemonnier and the old woman act as a stand-in for the audience. Though she feigns disinterest, Lemonnier can hardly contain her pleasure at Garat's song to her. And in case Lemonnier's reaction was not clear enough, the old woman articulates what the audience should be thinking at the moment. The brief close-up after Lemonnier departs gives Garat a chance to sing right to the camera and engage the spectator even more directly. However, throughout, his gestures remain understated, as he seems to have seamlessly adjusted his acting style from the larger-than-life, over-the-top performance style necessary on a large music hall stage to the subtle gestures that deliver more effectively on camera. Garat's new sound film performance style is similarly on display in Le Prince de Minuit, but in this film, the plot connects Garat to sound film technology even more directly. Garat plays Henri, a record salesman. He spends his evenings at a cabaret, pretending to be an exiled foreign prince at the request of the nightclub owner to attract customers. Unbeknownst to him, he actually bears a striking resemblance to a real prince, also played by Garat, who is living in Paris and does not wish to return to his home country. Garat's role was similarly charming to his role in Il est charmant. Unlike Il est charmant, which was an operetta, in Le Prince de Minuit, the record shop and nightclub settings provided diegetic justification for him to sing. In Le Prince de Minuit, Garat's star presence becomes inextricably intertwined with sound film technology. In early sound films, the visual presence of a phonograph often became a metonymy for sound film, serving as diegetic justification of musical performances, while also drawing attention to the novelty of the synchronization of sound and image. Charles O'Brien, in his book Cinema's Conversion to Sound, suggests that, quote, "It is difficult to think of a French film of the period with a contemporary setting that doesn't include a moment when a character places a needle on a spinning phonograph," end quote. Le Prince de Minuit features phonograph recordings not only through its setting and plot, but also through Garat's performances. Early in the film, two women enter the phonograph store looking for a record of a particular song they heard the night before. Garat takes them into a listening room, puts on a record, and begins singing. During an instrumental interlude, he takes the hand of one of the women and leads her into the middle of the room to dance. From an aerial shot, we see that the couple is dancing on a giant spinning record.
Caricouli, oh, caricouli, c'est un petit mot très joli, qui signifie surtout, je peux pas te donner de sous-sous, je n'en ai plus du tout, ah mais du tout, du tout. Caricouli, oh, caricouli, on donne l'impression d'être poli, si t'étais plus gentil, si Cambronne l'avait dit, caricouli, caricouli, caricouli.
Garat has whisked her off her feet with the sound of his recorded voice. In a later scene, he goes into a recording room at the record shop, begins playing an accompaniment disc, and stands in front of a microphone to sing. Before he sings, as the music swells, he says, "Je suis le disque. Écoutez-moi, fermez les yeux, et si votre âme se désole, retenez ces mots merveilleux." These words could very well be instructions to the cinematic audience. He begins to sing into the microphone and suddenly sees the image of Denise, the woman he loves, inside the center of the mic, smiling back at him.
Je suis le disque qui console. Écoutez-moi, fermez les yeux. Et si votre âme se désole, retenez ces mots merveilleux. Je vous aime d'un amour tendre, amour, 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 amour. Tant que vous voudrez les entendre, ces mots je les dirai toujours, tout ce qu'ils n'osent pas vous dire. Tous ses espoirs, tout son bonheur, oui, tout est gravé dans ma cire, comme votre nom dans son cœur. Près de moi, approchez-vous.
Though it is in his imagination, this performance exploits sound recording technology alongside cinematic effects as the conduit for this romance. Likewise, Garat's romantic ballad reaches and captivates his audience through these very technologies. His words prompted a springboard into fantasy, made possible only through sound cinema technology. And the cinematic effects that represent the images in his own imagination seem to offer an intimate look into Garat's own inner emotions, paralleled in the more subdued intimacy of his singing style. In this way, Garat's on-screen presence in the film, his very being, was closely linked with that of sound film technology. Considering Henri Garat's career as a sound film star reveals how certain stage performers were particularly suited for and adaptable to the new medium of synchronized sound. He adapted his performance style from the stage to highlight what was particularly novel about sound film. His performances on screen not only opened up a new facet of Garat's career, but they also gave audiences important points of continuity between familiar and less familiar media, aiding in the broader acceptance of the novelty of synchronized sound. The musical performances in early French sound films by Garat and other stage actors were critical tools in developing the new medium in a manner that would be not only accepted, but embraced by French critics and audiences. By opening up sound film as a means of accessing French stars, Garat's and other stars' musical performances left their mark on French cinema for decades to come. Thank you.